Maintaining my boat ends up costing me every year. That's it. After a lot of effort, searching, doubts and taxes, we are now the very proud owners of a new boat. Well, maybe it's new or second-hand, or to be completely honest, a somewhat beat-up old relic that we've totally fallen in love with, among other things because it was simply what we could afford. But it really doesn't matter. Happiness just washes over us. I remember the day I bought my boat as one of the happiest days of my life. Well, wait, the very happiest was actually my wedding day. Ah, no, I meant when my children were born. No, when I met my wife. Well, in the top 3 happiest days of my life is the one on the boat.
Well avoided, well avoided.
It's just that if I don't mention my wife,
we got off easy.
All that's left now is to sail, enjoy, and make the most of the 1,000 days of happiness the boat is going to give us. Well, but wait a moment, because we might still have some details to iron out. Because, of course, where do I leave this thing when I'm not sailing? Does it have everything I need to be legal? And maintenance? Will it cost me an arm and a leg? Will I have to take it out of the water every now and then? And if something breaks, what happens? Today we're going to see what it really costs to maintain a boat, and yes, it's the least fun part. We'll see how much all the required equipment costs, what the absolute bare minimum essentials are, and how you can save money on them. We'll also analyze the price of berths, which varies tremendously depending on where you live, along with ongoing maintenance, haul-outs, and repairs. By the end of today's video, you'll walk away knowing exactly how much it costs per year to own a boat, how much you can realistically save, and we'll cover it all using the real numbers from my own boat. Don't miss it.
This one isn't really that necessary for me. Do you know why?
Because it's free too.
Because of the elves?
Ah, the goblins as well. It's just that the goblins do absolutely everything on your boat. Oh my goodness, how very fortunate indeed. Now that you're a bit more relaxed, that you already have the boat with you and can take a thorough look at it, you'll realize one reality. If you bought the boat new, it comes with no electronics. Everything is paid for separately. If, on the other hand, you've bought a used one that's already a few years old, you'll face almost the exact opposite situation. It'll have lots of electronics and instruments that either no longer work or are simply outdated. So, in order to sail safely, you'll have to outfit it a little more and improve a few things. The most important thing, without any doubt at all, is safety. Depending on the cruising area, your flag, and the overall length of the boat, you'll need a set of mandatory equipment. For life jackets for the certified number of people. In my case, that's 10. And at an average price of about 20 euros for the cheapest ones, you're quickly looking at around 200 euros in jackets, although those will almost certainly already come included with the boat. The only thing you might eventually want to do at some point is buy a self-inflating life jacket, which is generally much more comfortable to wear, and for example, you can get the Decathlon one for around 60 euros. I have a couple of those. And on top of that, add the life jacket lights because they're mandatory if you're boating at night, about 70 euros to buy a pack of 10 lights. The life buoy, the flashlight and the lanyard are very likely already on board. With that, you'll have saved another 80 euros. First aid kit, a signaling mirror, a compass, a foghorn and binoculars. Plan on spending roughly 150 euros on all of this if it didn't already come with the boat. And remember, all of it is mandatory. What you are definitely going to have to spend money on sooner or later is the flares and the fire extinguisher. All of this expires more or less every 4 years, so you have to renew it no matter what. The 3 rockets with the 3 flares come out to about 120 euros and add another 30 euros for the fire extinguisher. That means that for safety equipment, you'll probably have to spend around 700 euros if you choose the cheapest possible options. I'll leave the full list along with a few links in the video description and in the post on our website. A truly fundamental safety element that you absolutely must consider as such is anchoring. The anchor itself and the chain together are your boat's handbrake, which will allow you to handle and deal with many dangers when you're close to the coast. Usually it's already on board, although its condition can sometimes be pretty poor. I, for example, after a few years ended up replacing the 50 meters of chain on my boat, and those 50 meters cost me about 248 euros. On top of that, you'll also have to add the mandatory electronics, at the very minimum a fixed VHF radio with GPS for a boat like mine, which will cost you roughly about 300 euros more. Up to this point, that's the mandatory equipment. If you're lucky, for about 1,000 euros you can manage by reusing whatever on board is still in good condition. I should warn you that if you're under the Spanish flag, you'll run into some administrative hurdles. I remember, for example, that even though my boat had a fixed radio and a chart plotter with GPS connected, the chart plotter wasn't properly recorded in the paperwork, and when I went to get it regularized, it turned out it was no longer accepted. The plotter was type approved years ago, but since it wasn't registered at the time, the administration no longer accepts it, and without it, the radio doesn't either. So I had to spend 211.75 euros to buy a GPS with its corresponding installation certificate just to sort out the paperwork and get the MMSI so everything would be in order.
But what's approved is better, right? It's safer. It's for my safety.
The guy who sold me the GPS and the installation certificate told me, if you want, I won't even come install it. You can keep it in a drawer because the one you already have works for you. From that point, you might need to add some additional electronics or update the ones you already have. For me, the absolute bare minimum when it comes to electronics is a depth sounder and a chart plotter. These two things can cost a fortune or very little. As a chart plotter, you can actually use your own phone or a tablet even, as we've seen in an episode of the channel, a car radio or a motorcycle GPS. Here, the prices are whatever you want to spend, officially like 500, 800 or 20,000 euros. Or if you go the route I took, you can manage it for under 100 euros. I consider this vital for navigating in unfamiliar areas. Although for me, the most important instrument to carry on board, whether you have a motorboat or a sailboat, is a depth sounder. It will allow you to get close to the coastline, pull in near beaches, and anchor safely and securely. A basic fixed Raymarine unit can cost you roughly around 300 euros. From there you can move on to whatever you want, fish finders with forward-looking radar, the ones that can draw the bottom in 3D, things that can cost several thousand euros. But remember, the truly important piece of information is the depth. And that, if you've seen our videos, you can also achieve with a $35 Chinese depth sounder. That would be the essential equipment. From there, my recommendation, if the boat is second-hand, is to reuse everything you already have on board. I did it that way on mine. The depth sounders, the wind instruments, the speed log, they're things where sensor quality from years ago was really very good and they're still fully usable. Also, we can connect most of them to each other, either with our famous Raspberry Pi or with other low-cost equipment that we've already seen on the channel. And this applies especially to what is, in my opinion, the third most important electronic component, the autopilot. If you're planning to take somewhat longer trips, or if you're sailing solo, it's absolutely essential. Unfortunately, it's not cheap at all. The simplest Raymarine ones start at 1,500 euros for boats with a steering wheel, and about 700 euros for tiller-steered ones like the ST1000, for example. If you already have it, it's absolutely worth fixing it and keeping it maintained. With all this, you already have a great boat ready to cast off. And as we saw in the previous episode, sailing is cheap. Sailing is cheap because what's truly expensive, the thing I've spent the most money on in the entire history of my boat, is not sailing.
You're finally going to talk about moorings.
I'm going to talk.
It's finally time to talk about moorings, so thank our sponsor and the Patreons.
Thank you very much to Smart Sails, our sponsor this year, and above all to our Patreons who are continuously supporting us so that we can keep making these videos and can test and invent new gadgets for you. So thank you so very much, and please do continue supporting us through our website, through our online store, and also on our Patreon page.
Proceed.
Moorings. What really ends up costing an arm and a leg is keeping a boat moored in a harbor. I'm going to share the actual numbers from my Marina and what it ultimately ended up costing me. To give you an idea, for mooring my 10-meter sailboat, in those first few years I was spending around 3,600 euros per year just to have a place to leave the boat floating. Over the years I changed moorings, and by looking for a private individual to rent me theirs, I managed to bring it down to $2,800 a year. All of that lasted until the sweet deal ran out. And do you know why? Because the rules at marinas are no joke. When you have a boat and you're not sailing, you need a safe place to leave it. As long as you're on board, you can anchor somewhere sheltered near the coast using your own anchor. And that's possible in almost the whole world. And as long as it's not a prohibited area, it's completely free. That's why, if you're sailing around the world on your own boat, you live on it, or you're constantly traveling, keeping it can be dirt cheap. But if you want to get off it and leave it moored on land, the usual thing is to turn to a marina. There, the boat will be safe, and you'll be able to access it very conveniently whenever you want. These marinas, and now I'm going to be talking mainly about Spain, although I'm very interested in you telling me about your experiences in other countries in the comments, are located within the public maritime terrestrial domain. This means that the sea and the coastline belong to all of us, or more precisely speaking, to the state. Therefore, when someone wants to build a marina, a beach bar, or otherwise make private use of that space, the state has to grant an administrative concession for a specific, limited number of years. For instance, the marina where I am has a 50-year concession, and it is scheduled to expire next year. The holder of this concession pays a very large sum upfront and then also pays an annual fee each year to the state. And for us, when we go to the marina, we will have to decide between two options: renting, plain and simple, or buying a share in that concession, meaning that we acquire a mooring right. If we choose the traditional rental option, which is the most common way to get started, there are also a number of different alternatives. The first one is transient rental. It is limited to short stays of less than 15 days or a month, and it is paid per day. It is intended for those who are traveling along a route. Most ports in Spain are required to reserve between 10% and 15% of their berths for transit. Even though we all know some marinas where it seems they quite blatantly ignore that rule, keeping the berth completely full of members throughout the entire year.
10 to 15%.
10 to 15% year-round.
Not just in the summer or anything year-round.
Imagine, for instance, that in Puerto Chico, there really should be around 10% of the berth set aside for transient boats.
Okay.
As you can imagine, transient docking is the most expensive option at my marina. In the low season, a 10-meter boat pays about 15 euros plus VAT per day, and in the high season this goes up to about 30 euros, but this can vary enormously depending on the specific area. In the most exclusive places like Ibiza or Puerto Banús, the price shoots up in the summer to as much as 250 or even 500 euros per day. But the thing is, in the Balearic Islands in general, the rates are pretty outrageous. On the mainland it depends on the area. The northern Mediterranean area runs around 50 euros per night. For example, at Port Olympic in Barcelona it comes out to about 49 euros a night, which even seems cheap to me for being Barcelona compared to what I pay and what hotels cost in Barcelona. If we head down toward Valencia, the night costs around 30 euros and prices drop sharply on the Cantabrian coast and especially on the Galician coast, where you can find spots for 15 euros a night. On top of all that, you have to add VAT and the water and electricity fees. I remember that in Formentera it was almost cheaper to buy wine than to use the water from the port's hose because they charged you by the liter.
That's quite correct. Sounds good to me.
They gave you a small device, kind of like a meter, that you had to attach so you could properly connect the nozzle to the hose, and then you put it on and filled up the tanks. And then, when you finished filling the tank, we would take it up to the boat and you would start blowing in the opposite direction to make the numbers be in your favor. In fact, Spain is among the most expensive countries in Europe for this. France, Greece and Croatia, along with the northern countries, are generally considerably cheaper when it comes to daily transit fees. However, if you want to establish your home port, transient mooring isn't an option. You have to move on to the second one, the monthly rental with an annual contract. This rental can be paid directly to the port company or sometimes to an individual who sublets their berth. Although lately, marina bylaws are increasingly prohibiting this practice in order to push you to pay up, as happened, for example, at this port. And how much does an annual contract cost nowadays for a 10-meter boat in a port like mine? Well, brace yourselves. The official rate comes out to 6,169 euros per year, plus VAT. If you sign up for the full annual term, they bring it down to roughly 4,600 euros, plus VAT. That works out to about 385 euros per month, plus taxes. This is, by a very wide margin, going to be the single biggest expense your boat will ever have. What's curious is that just 50 kilometers from here, at the port of Laredo, which has become really popular, this exact same boat pays 175 euros per month under an annual contract. So just look at the difference in only 50 kilometers. If we go over the map of Spain, under annual contracts, the breakdown is really very clear. The Balearic Islands and the Costa del Sol are sitting at outrageous figures, somewhere between 600 and 1,200 euros a month. That is, if you can find an annual slip, because they're more interested in kicking you out in the summer to cash in on transient traffic. On the mainland Mediterranean coast, the average runs around 300 or 400 euros a month. And in the Basque country and Cantabria, well, that's it, about 250, 300 euros. And the cheapest in Spain, without a doubt, is Asturias and Galicia, where you could find rates between 130 and 170 euros a month for the same boat. In my case, since I wanted to stay at my port and the annual rental seemed like an exaggeration to me, I decided to take the next step. Buy a berth. But careful, let's clarify it again. You're not actually buying a piece of the sea. You're buying the right to use a small part of a temporary concession, and that right expires on the day the concession ends. I bought mine 5 years ago for 27,000 euros, fully aware that the concession had exactly 6 years left. That is, it will expire next year. When I bought it, my monthly rent dropped completely to zero, but I started paying the fixed fees of the marina community, the port fees, and the property tax. Yes, the property tax. At my port, you pay the city hall the real estate property tax for a small patch of water that simply won't stop moving.
That's exactly what I was about to say, Counselor. Real estate? What exactly do you mean by real estate?
Well, it could be two things. That you're paying for the boat that moves, or for the water.
It also moves, or for the dock that moves.
It's moving too. Adding all of this up and then dividing it by the month's worth of maintenance fees, I end up paying 91 euros a month. That sounds pretty great, right? Going from 385 euros a month down to 91 euros a month. But of course, I did have to put down the $27,000 up front. If we do the actual math, which I will do for you, if I divide those $27,000 by the 72 months that the concession lasts and then add the $91 in monthly expenses, the slip is costing me approximately 460 sasis per month. More expensive than the port's official rental rate. Have I come out ahead with the change? Well, it's a mystery we'll find out next year when the concession expires and I see whether we former owners have a right of first refusal or priority in the renewal. I can't really tell you with complete precision which option is truly the best. At my marina, berths like mine are still being sold even today for 20,000 euros, with only 1 year still remaining on the concession. I could sell my berth these days and it would be snapped up for 20,000 euros. The next major burden in the cost of a boat, and I can assure you this will largely depend on how much effort you put in yourselves, is maintenance. Aside from any unexpected issues that may come up, if you want the boat to be in good condition for sailing and not give you any nasty surprises, you're going to have to invest money and sweat into maintaining it. The critical points essentially consist of 4. The hull. Everything below the waterline requires regular and ongoing inspection and maintenance. The engine. Just like in any car, if you want it to last for many years, you must follow the scheduled maintenance cycles at least once every year. And that's even considering that marine engines can last for many years. The rigging and the deck. You have to properly take care of the sails, the lines, the winches, the hatches, and also keep the deck clean and completely free of leaks. The electronic system and the electronics, which also require care and replacement, especially the batteries. Maintenance of the underwater hull normally requires taking the boat out of the water, renewing the anti-fouling, changing the sacrificial anodes, and checking or replacing the seacocks. Just the crane operation alone already costs quite a bit. For example, my last haul out cost exactly 193.97 to take the boat out and set it on the cradle. 240 euros for the 20 days I had the boat out of the water, and 162.45 to put it back in the sea. This time I had it out for a long time because it coincided with a work trip. On top of that you add the sacrificial anodes, about 10 euros, the anti-fouling paint, the rollers, the filler to fix damage, and you could easily end up spending another 250 euros. And keep in mind, all of this is doing it yourself. If you pay someone to do it for you, you can safely figure it's going to cost you double. In my case, the annual haul out runs around 650 euros at a minimum. If I do everything myself, if it's done by a third party, it ends up being well over 1,000 euros every year, easily. Let's move on to the engine. The service done by me, changing filters, oil and that kind of thing, buying smart and cheap, costs me about 100 euros in parts. An affordable professional will charge you at least 300 euros for an engine like mine. For deck repairs, replacing lines and other small details, plan on about 100 euros a year. And for electrical maintenance, checking connections, replacing a cable, electronic failures and similar things, count another 100 euros. That is, the basic annual maintenance would come out to about 950 euros a year. Of course I spend less because I have a trick. I use silicone anti-fouling, which lets me avoid hauling out every year and do it every 2 or 3 years instead. I did it without it too.
That's what I was going to say.
When I had a self-polishing one, I also did it every 3 years.
Every 2 or 3 or 4?
This time there may be more. But there are also other things that need to be replaced. And even though they don't break every year, they happen from time to time and you have to factor them in. Every 15 years, plan on replacing the standing rigging and the sails. Budget about 7,000 euros as a low estimate, doing as much of it yourselves as you can. The seacocks can last you about 20 years if they're good. But when it's time to replace them, budget another 600 euros. The batteries have a realistic lifespan of about 8 years if you take good care of them, which in my case comes out to another 700 euros. So, spreading all these expenses out over the long term into an annual average, and considering that I now haul the boat out every 3 years, the math comes out like this. More or less about 100 euros in essential maintenance, plus another 200 for unexpected expenses. About 1/300 a year in total. That's really pushing everything to the absolute limit and doing all the work by myself. If a shipyard or a marina handled it, that bill could very easily triple. With this, you'll already have a boat in perfect condition. Well, except for one detail. If you fly the Spanish flag, every 5 years they're going to force you to haul the boat out of the water to pass the inspection. An inspector will come to assess its condition and raise objections, which in my experience are more formal paperwork hurdles than real problems with the boat. But anyway, add at least 500 euros for the inspection, that is another 100 euros a year hidden in there. So if we add everything up, insurance, maintenance, mooring, keeping my boat ultimately ends up costing me each year. How much do you say?
Well, I don't know.
Felipe, for example, told me that a boat cost 1,000 euros per meter.
1,000 euros per meter for the upkeep.
Between 1,000 and 1,800 euros per meter. Mine costs 7,222 euros each year. But with that number in mind, I want you to notice a truly brutal reality. 500 euros are just for the mooring. That's almost 75% of the total budget, so you can get an idea of the enormous weight the marina carries in the overall cost, and how having a boat in one region or another can make your hobby an affordable indulgence or an outright ruin. Is it worth it? Well, when you're actually out sailing, you really do think it is. When you're sitting on the couch, you tend to think it isn't. If you buy a boat, make sure it's genuinely for sailing.